The smell was the first thing that truly felt like mine. New paint, the faint vanilla of the candles Daniel had bought, and the clean, sharp scent of oak from the walk-in closet. It was the smell of a life scrubbed clean. I was folding a stack of new sweaters, cashmere so soft it felt like a promise, and arranging them in a drawer that slid shut with a quiet, satisfying sigh. Everything in this house was quiet and satisfying, the opposite of before. I ran my hand along the smooth wood, a small, involuntary smile playing on my lips. This was real. The soaring glass walls that looked out onto a green, meticulously kept lawn. The hushed, wealthy quiet of the neighborhood. Daniel, a good man, a gentleman, whose loudest noise was his laugh. It was all real. My fingers, tracing the inside of the empty drawer, dipped into the far back corner. They brushed against something small and cold, metal. I frowned, expecting a stray screw or a leftover bit from the installers. I pinched it between my thumb and forefinger and pulled it into the light. And the air left my lungs. It was a cufflink, a simple silver square, now tarnished around the edges. A small piece of black fabric was still threaded through its clasp, frayed and worn. There was a tiny, deep scratch just to the left of center, an imperfection I knew as well as a scar on my own hand. It was Mark's. I dropped it as if it were hot. It clattered on the hardwood floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the still room. My heart started a frantic, ugly rhythm against my ribs. No, it wasn't possible. This was a new house. The closet was custom built. The drawers were empty when we moved in. All of my clothes were new. I had made a ritual of it, a bonfire of the past, burning or donating every single thread Mark had ever seen me in, ever touched. Nothing old had come with me. Nothing. My mind raced, scrambling for an explanation. It must have fallen out of one of the mover's pockets. A coincidence, a similar design. But I knew that scratch. I had watched him make it, fumbling with his keys against the dressing table the morning of our final court date, the day I'd last seen him, the day he'd worn that particular suit. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the small, metallic intruder on my floor. It was a piece of him, a shard of that life, embedded in the heart of my sanctuary. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. I picked it up, my hand shaking, and walked into the bathroom. Without another thought, I lifted the toilet lid and dropped it in. The splash was final. I flushed. Twice. But the feeling didn't go away. The feeling of being contaminated. That night, sleep was a shallow, restless thing. I kept drifting off, only to be jolted awake by the memory of that cold metal in my hand. Daniel slept soundly beside me, his breathing deep and even. The security system's small green light glowed reassuringly on the panel by the door. A fortress. We were safe. At what must have been 2 in the morning, the fortress screamed. The alarm was a high-pitched, piercing shriek that sliced through the dark. It wasn't just a sound, it was a physical force vibrating through the mattress, through my bones. I shot upright, my throat closing up instantly. Daniel was already moving, swinging his legs out of bed, grabbing his phone from the nightstand. "It's okay, Sarah, it's okay," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. His thumbs flew across the screen. "I've got the cameras." The shrieking stopped as abruptly as it began. The silence that rushed in to replace it felt heavy, watchful. "Anything?" I whispered. My own voice sounded thin, alien. He shook his head, scrolling through the live feeds. The front gate, the driveway, the patio, the back lawn. All of them were displayed in crisp, infrared black and white. Empty. The motion sensors hadn't even been triggered. Nothing. Not a thing. The log says it was the perimeter sensor on the west side, near the trees. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Probably just a buck. These high-end systems can be a little sensitive. I'll get the company to come out and recalibrate it tomorrow. He turned to me, his face soft in the glow of the phone. You okay? I nodded, but it was a lie. My entire body was humming with adrenaline. A deer. It was just a deer. Or a raccoon, or a glitch. It was a perfectly logical explanation. I repeated it to myself. It was just a stupid glitch. I'm fine, I said. Just startled me. Daniel got up and checked the locks, a routine to soothe my nerves, I knew. He was a good man. He came back to bed and pulled me against him. Try to get some more sleep. We're safe, I promise. I closed my eyes and let his warmth seep into me, but my mind wouldn't shut down. The image of the cufflink flashed behind my eyelids again and again. An impossibility, a glitch in reality. And now, the alarm, a glitch in our security. After an hour of pretending, I slipped out of bed. The house was dark, save for the pale moonlight filtering through the enormous panes of glass that made up the living room wall. They were beautiful in the daytime, blurring the line between inside and out. At night, they transformed the house into a fishbowl. I walked to the great window, my bare feet silent on the cool floor. The security lights cast pools of sterile, white light across the lawn, making the grass look like it was covered in frost. Everything within the circle of light was clear, defined, safe. But beyond it, where the manicured garden met the untamed edge of the woods, the darkness was absolute, a solid wall of black. I stood there, looking out, telling myself how foolish I was being. This was my home now. I was protected. Mark was hundreds of miles away, a creature of the past, neutered by restraining orders and the law. He couldn't touch me here. He couldn't get to me. And that's when I saw it. It wasn't much, just a shape, standing just inside the tree line. Perfectly still. It was outside the reach of the motion lights, a silhouette darker than the surrounding dark. I couldn't make out a face, or clothes, or anything. It was just a form, unmistakably human. My breath hitched. I didn't move. I didn't dare. Was it a trick of the moonlight, a strange shadow cast by a tree branch? I stared, my eyes burning, trying to force it to resolve into something harmless, a stump, a strangely shaped bush. But it didn't change. It just stood there, watching the house. Every instinct in my body screamed. The part of me that had survived Mark, the part that knew how to read the subtle shift in the air before the storm broke, it was screaming now. This was real. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, a desperate plea to whatever God might be listening. Please be nothing. Please just be my imagination. When I opened them again, the space at the edge of the woods was empty. It was gone. A cold sweat broke out across my entire body. I flattened my hand against the glass, the chill of it a shocking jolt. Had I imagined it? Had the stress of the cufflink, the shock of the alarm, finally made my mind crack? I scanned the tree line, back and forth, my gaze frantic. Nothing, just trees and darkness. The woods were silent. The garden was empty. The house was quiet. See something? Daniel's voice, soft and sleepy from behind me, made me flinch so hard I gasped. I whipped around, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. He stood in the doorway of the living room, a silhouette against the dim light from the hall. "Sarah? What is it? What are you looking at?" I looked from his concerned face back to the impenetrable darkness outside. What could I say? "I think I saw a man watching us from the woods, just after I found my abusive ex-husband's cufflink in our brand-new closet." I would sound insane.
He would think the trauma had finally broken me. He'd look at me with pity, and that was something I couldn't bear. I forced a smile, a brittle, cracking thing. I wrapped my arms around myself, feigning a chill. "Nothing," I lied, my voice a strained whisper. "Nothing at all. I guess I was just looking at the moon." He walked over and put his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder and looking out at the same view. "It is pretty tonight," he said, completely oblivious. "But it's cold. Come back to bed." I let him lead me away from the window, away from the glass wall that suddenly felt less like a window and more like the one-way mirror of an observation room. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling. I couldn't shake the image of that silent, motionless shape. It wasn't a deer that set off the alarm, I knew it. And it wasn't my imagination standing at the edge of my perfect new life, staring in. Someone had been out there. And they knew I had seen them. For the next few days, I lived in a state of low-grade, humming anxiety.
It was a feeling I knew well, a ghost from my old life. I told myself I was being stupid. The figure in the woods was a trick of the light. The alarm was a faulty sensor. The cufflink, well, I couldn't explain the cufflink, so I just pushed it down, burying it under the weight of my new, perfect reality. I focused on the mundane. I went to the grocery store. I bought organic vegetables and expensive cheese. I planned a dinner party. I was the woman who lived in the beautiful glass house, the wife of a good man. I was safe. I was pulling into the driveway after a trip to the mall, the back of the SUV filled with crisp paper shopping bags, when it happened. I killed the engine, and the silence of the garage settled around me. I gathered my purse and keys, and as I slid out of the car, I caught the scent. It was faint at first, barely there. Sandalwood and something sharp, like crushed mint. My hand froze on the door handle. I stopped breathing, tilting my head, sniffing the air like an animal. My heart gave a single hard thump against my ribs. It couldn't be. But it was, unmistakably. It was the aftershave Mark used, the one he'd been wearing for 10 years, the one I'd bought him for our 3rd anniversary. A mistake I'd had to smell every single day afterward. I slammed the car door shut, the sound echoing in the concrete space. I scanned the garage. It was empty. Just our 2 cars, a rack of Daniel's gardening tools, and a stack of flattened moving boxes. The scent was stronger here, near the door leading into the house. I fumbled with the keys, my fingers suddenly clumsy and slick. It's nothing. It's a neighbor's cologne drifting over. Someone walked past the house. My mind was racing, throwing out explanations, anything to smother the rising panic. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, into the cool, air-conditioned hallway. The scent was here, too. A ghost hanging in the air. I dropped my purse and the keys on the entryway table with a clatter. "Daniel?" I called out, my voice thin. Silence. Of course, he was at the office. He wouldn't be home for hours. I walked slowly through the house. Kitchen, living room, dining room. I sniffed the air in every corner, every doorway. It felt insane. I was like a dog tracking a trail that wasn't there. The smell was stronger near the base of the stairs, leading up to our bedroom. It was as if someone had stood right there, just for a moment, and then vanished. I ran up the stairs, my heart pounding in my ears. I checked our bedroom, the bathroom, the closet where I'd found the cufflink. Nothing. The air smelled only of clean linen and the vanilla candles I kept on the dresser. The scent was gone. Utterly gone. As quickly as it had appeared, it had dissipated, leaving me standing in the middle of my bedroom, feeling like I was losing my mind.
It didn't just feel like he was watching anymore. It felt like he had been inside. He had walked through my home. He had breathed my air. The next few days passed in a blur of forced normalcy. I didn't tell Daniel. I couldn't. The words would sound like madness. I thought I saw a man in the woods, and then the other day I imagined I smelled my ex-husband's aftershave. He would suggest therapy. He would look at me with that gentle, worried expression that made me feel like a broken thing he had to fix. I couldn't stand that. So I said nothing. I smiled during our dinner party. I laughed at our friends' jokes. I pretended. On Tuesday, the package arrived. I'd been out in the garden, trying to distract myself by pulling up the few weeds that dared to grow in our perfect lawn. The delivery truck was quiet, electric. I barely heard it pull up. The driver, a young man in a crisp brown uniform, left a plain cardboard box on the doorstep, rang the bell once, and was gone before I could even stand up. I walked to the front door, wiping dirt from my hands onto my jeans. The box was medium-sized, surprisingly heavy. There was no return address, no sender's name, just my name and our address printed on a clean white label in a plain, generic font. I carried it inside and set it on the kitchen island. I stared at it. It could be from anyone, a late housewarming gift, something Daniel ordered. But Daniel always told me when he ordered something. My stomach twisted. Every instinct told me not to open it, to just throw it in the trash, take it outside and burn it. But I couldn't. I had to know.
I grabbed a knife from the block and sliced through the packing tape. The sound was loud in the quiet house. I folded back the cardboard flaps. Inside, nestled in a bed of white packing peanuts, was a book. It was an album, bound in smooth black leather. It looked expensive. There was no title, no markings of any kind. My hands felt cold. I lifted it out. It was heavy, solid, real. I hesitated for a long moment, my thumb resting on the cover. Then, with a deep breath, I opened it to the first page. It was a photograph of me. I was sitting in the living room, in the big armchair by the window, a coffee mug cradled in my hands. I recognized the robe I was wearing. My hair was a mess. It was from a week ago, Tuesday morning. I remembered that morning. The photo was high quality, the focus crystal clear. It was taken from outside, through the glass. I could see the faint reflection of the oak tree on the lawn in the window pane. He must have been standing right there, just beyond the patio. My breath caught in my throat. I felt a wave of nausea. I forced myself to turn the page. Another photo. Me, asleep in our bed. The moonlight from the huge bedroom window cast a stripe of pale light across the duvet. My face was turned towards the camera. My mouth was slightly open. It was the most vulnerable a person could be. He had been outside that window, in the middle of the night, watching me sleep. I started flipping faster. My hands were shaking. A photo of me on the phone in the garden, laughing at something Daniel had said. I was turned away, looking out towards the woods. It was the same day I saw the figure. A photo of me getting out of my car in the garage. A photo of me standing at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables. Dozens of them. An entire chronicle of my private, unguarded moments. Each one a violation. Each one proof that my sanctuary was a stage.
and I was the unwilling star of a show I never knew was happening. The glass walls Daniel was so proud of, the ones that were supposed to bring the outside in, they didn't just let in the light. They let in the eyes. They turned my life into an exhibit for anyone who cared to look. He had been so patient, so quiet. The photos weren't blurry, hurried snapshots. They were composed, deliberate, the work of someone who had all the time in the world, someone who was enjoying this. I reached the end of the album. There was only one more page. My fingers trembled as I turned it. The final photo was different. It was taken from a lower angle, looking up towards the front porch. It showed me standing in the doorway, my garden-stained jeans, my brow furrowed in concentration as I looked down at a brown cardboard box in my hands. The box I was holding right now. The blood drained from my face. My mind struggled to process it. An icy coldness spread from my chest outwards, prickling my skin, freezing my limbs. This wasn't a record of the past few weeks. This wasn't a threat of what he could do. This was the present. This was happening right now. He took this picture just a few minutes ago, while the delivery truck was here, while I was walking up from the garden. He had been out there, somewhere close enough to capture the confused expression on my face, close enough to see me carry his little gift inside. He was still out there, watching me, waiting for me, watching my terror. The album slipped from my numb fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a solid, echoing thud. The sound broke the spell. I gasped, sucking in air like I'd just surfaced from underwater. I scrambled backwards, away from the kitchen island, away from the book lying open on the floor, showcasing my own stolen life. My eyes shot to the wall of windows in the living room, to the perfectly manicured lawn, the neat flower beds, the dark, silent edge of the woods beyond. There was no one there. The sun was shining. A bird was chirping somewhere. The scene was peaceful, normal. But I knew. He was there, hidden among the trees, or behind a neighbor's hedge, or maybe even closer. He was watching me, and I had no doubt at all, that wherever he was smiling. Daniel had to go to San Diego for an overnight conference. I remembered telling him to be safe, kissing him goodbye at the door as the sun rose, and feeling a small, stupid pang of loneliness as his car disappeared down the driveway.
The house was huge, and its silence had a habit of expanding to fill whatever space a person left behind. I tried to see it as a good thing, a night to myself, a long bath, a silly movie, an entire pizza just for me, a little bit of the old independent Sarah. I drew the bath as hot as I could stand it, pouring in scented oils until the water turned milky and the steam fogged the whole room. For a little while it worked. Submerged in the heat, with my eyes closed, I could almost pretend I was in a spa. I could almost forget the album on the floor of my office closet, shoved under a pile of old sweaters. I could almost forget the lingering memory of sandalwood and mint. When I finally got out, dripping and pink-skinned, the entire bathroom was white with condensation. The mirrors, the chrome fixtures, the large glass panel of the shower, all of it was opaque, covered in a thick blanket of warm vapor. I wrapped a towel around myself, another around my hair, and felt a moment of simple physical comfort. I walked to the sink, habit, I guess. I used the side of my hand to wipe a clear space on the surface of the mirror, wanting to see my own face, to reassure myself that I was still here. My hand stopped mid-swipe. There was something there, under the film of condensation, dark lines against the pale gray. My heart didn't just thump, it seized. It felt like a fist clenching in my chest. Slowly, I wiped more of the glass clear. Letters, words. They had been drawn on the glass with a finger before the steam had covered them. Now, as I cleared a patch, they appeared. You look prettier when you're scared. I didn't scream. I couldn't. All the air was gone from my lungs. My entire body went cold, a shocking, icy plunge that started in my stomach and shot through my veins. My bare feet felt fused to the tile floor. He was here. Not outside, not in the woods, not watching through a lens. He had been in this room. He had stood right where I was standing now. He had reached out a hand and written on this mirror, while I was in the bathtub. The sound of the running water, it would have covered any noise he made. He could have been standing in the doorway, watching me, and I never would have known. The steam, the perfumed oils, the sense of security. It was all a lie. I had been marinating in my own vulnerability. My legs finally unlocked. I stumbled backwards, crashing against the shower door. I fumbled for the handle on the bathroom door, my wet hand slipping on the smooth metal. I finally got it open and scrambled out into the bedroom, slamming the heavy wooden door shut behind me. I twisted the lock, the click sounding impossibly loud in the sudden silence. I backed away from the door, my eyes wide, scanning every corner of my own bedroom. The bed, neatly made. The windows looking out into the deepening twilight. The chair in the corner, empty, all empty. But the feeling of being watched was overwhelming now. It was a physical pressure against my skin. Okay, think, just think. My phone. I needed my phone. It was on the nightstand. I crept over, snatched it up. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely unlock it. I had to try twice. 911. My thumb hovered over the numbers. What would I say? There's a message on my steamed-up mirror. No, I haven't seen anyone. They would think I was crazy. A prank call. Daniel would get a call from the local police, and I would have to explain this madness. I backed into the furthest corner of the room, by the window, and slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest, making myself as small as possible. The towel felt flimsy, useless. I was exposed. I just need to stay here. Stay in this locked room until morning. Daniel will be home tomorrow. Everything will be okay in the daylight. You're just tired. You're stressed. You're imagining it. But I knew I wasn't. That's when the bedside lamp flickered. It blinked once, then twice. A weak, stuttering pulse of light. And then it went out. I stared at it, frozen. A faulty bulb? A loose connection? That's all. Then the main overhead light in the bedroom clicked on. It shone down,
bright and accusing. I flinched. A moment later, it clicked off again. On, off, on, off, on, off. It was a frantic, rhythmic blinking, like a coded message I couldn't understand. It wasn't random. It was controlled. Someone was playing with the switches. But there were no switches.
The whole house was on Daniel's smart system, controlled by voice, by phone, by an electronic panel in the hallway. A sound started, drifting up from the living room below. It was music, faint at first, then growing louder. A cheerful, orchestral piece. I recognized it instantly. A cold dread, far worse than the fear I'd felt in the bathroom, washed over me. It was the music from our wedding video, Mark's and mine. The song we walked back down the aisle to. He was playing it. He was playing our goddamn wedding video downstairs on the 70-inch television. I pressed my hands over my ears, but I couldn't block it out. It was creeping up through the floorboards, a happy, celebratory sound that now felt like a funeral dirge. He wasn't just in the house, he was in the system. The beautiful, seamless technology that controlled our perfect life was his now. Then a new sound joined the symphony. This one was closer. It came from the small smart speaker on my nightstand, not 5 feet from where I was huddled. A soft, acoustic guitar intro. A man's gentle voice began to sing. Our song. The one Mark and I had slow danced to in our first apartment. The one he always put on after a fight as a way of saying sorry without ever having to say the words. "Stop," I whispered, my voice a dry rasp. "Please, stop." The speaker didn't stop. The volume began to climb. Slowly, steadily. The singer's voice, once a gentle melody, filled the room, becoming a distorted, booming presence. It was everywhere. In my ears, in my skull, vibrating through the floor into my bones. The cheerful orchestra from downstairs, the intimate ballad in the room with me, they clashed, creating a horrible, meaningless wall of noise. I squeezed my eyes shut. I couldn't think. It was a sensory assault. He was using my own memories as a weapon, twisting them into instruments of torture. My perfect home, my safe place, had become a personalized hell, designed just for me. The blinking lights, the warring melodies, it was all for an audience of one. I was screaming inside my head, begging for it to end. And then it did. In an instant, everything stopped. The lights went out. The warring music from downstairs and in the bedroom cut off. The entire house plunged into a sudden, shocking silence. A darkness so complete my eyes couldn't adjust. The transition was so abrupt it felt like the world had ended. The silence was worse, 1,000 times worse. The noise had been a distraction, something to focus on. The silence was a void, a vacuum waiting to be filled. I held my breath, straining my ears, listening for something, anything. But there was nothing. No hum from the refrigerator, no glow from the alarm clock, no gentle whir of the air conditioning. He'd cut the power. The whole house was dead. I sat there in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break them. The only sound in the entire universe was the ragged sound of my own breath and the blood pounding in my ears. I listened, for a floorboard creaking, for a door opening, for a whisper. How long I sat there, I don't know. Seconds stretched into minutes.
Every nerve in my body was screaming. He wasn't playing anymore. The show was over. Then I heard it, from downstairs. A single, sharp crack that sliced through the heavy silence. It was unmistakable. It was clean and violent. The sound of shattering glass. He was coming in. No more games, no more hiding in the system or behind the walls. He was physically breaking his way into my prison. I heard the faint, delicate tinkle of the broken pieces scattering across the hardwood floor below. And then I heard the first footstep. It was heavy, measured, the sound of a man's shoe on the wooden floor of the entryway. A man who was in no hurry at all. A man who knew exactly where I was. The world was the smell of cedar wood and Daniel's cologne. I was folded into the dark, knees to my chest, my cheek pressed against the hard-packed sleeve of a winter coat. My breath was a prisoner in my own lungs. I held it, until my chest ached and little spots of light danced behind my eyelids. Below me on the first floor, the faint crunching of glass under shoes had stopped. The silence that followed was heavy. It had a physical weight to it that pressed down on the house. Then I heard it, a single creak, from the bottom step of the main staircase.
My heart, which had been a frantic drum, seemed to stop altogether. Another creak, higher up, slower this time. He was taking his time. He knew I wasn't going anywhere. There was nowhere to go. This was the end of the line. The sound was agonizingly slow. Each step was a measured beat in a countdown. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to picture the layout of the bedroom, the door to the hallway, the bathroom door which I'd locked, the large window that looked out into the blackness of the woods, the closet where I was hiding. There were no other exits. I was in a box inside a box. Creak. He was on the landing now. I could hear the subtle shift in the sound, the footstep falling on the thick runner of the hallway carpet instead of the bare wood of the stairs. It was a soft, muffled thud. Closer. So much closer. Sarah. The voice was low, conversational. It cut through the dark and slid under the closet door like a wisp of smoke. It was the same voice he used to use years ago, when he'd find me crying after a fight. The same voice he'd used to tell me he was only hard on me because he loved me so much. My whole body went rigid. I couldn't have moved if I'd wanted to. "I know you're in here, Sarah." A soft shuffle of feet just outside the bedroom door. A pause. "We used to love playing games, didn't we? But this one's over now. No more running." The bedroom doorknob rattled. Once, twice. Then a heavy thud as his shoulder hit the wood. The frame shuddered. I bit down on my lip to keep from making a sound, tasting the salt of blood. He wasn't going to be stopped by a simple lock. Another thud, harder this time. A crack echoed in the room. He was breaking it down. And then a new sound, a quiet scraping, metal on metal. He wasn't using brute force anymore. He was picking the lock. Of course he was. Mark knew how to do things like that. He always liked having keys to things that weren't his. A soft click. The bedroom door swung open with a low groan. I could hear his breathing now,
It was right there, in the same room as me. A steady, unhurried rhythm. He took a few steps into the room. A floorboard protested under his weight. I imagined him standing there, his head tilted, listening, searching the shadows. "Come on now," he said, his voice a sick parody of tenderness. "The house is telling me you're in the closet. The temperature change, the carbon dioxide levels. Daniel's toys are very clever, but they were my toys first." I didn't understand what he meant. My mind couldn't process it. My entire focus was on the thin slice of darkness under the closet door. A shadow fell across it. He was right there, standing just on the other side. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. I could feel his presence, his stillness. He was enjoying this. He was savoring it. Then the doorknob twisted. The latch clicked back, and the heavy door was ripped open with such force that it slammed against the wall. For a second, we were frozen. Me, a crumpled shape among the hanging clothes. Him, a large silhouette against the faint moonlight coming through the main window. His face was a mask of shadows, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze. He wasn't smiling. He just looked hungry. I didn't think. I didn't plan. My body just reacted. With a scream that tore out of my throat, raw and animal, I kicked out with both feet. I was curled up, and the motion was like uncoiling a spring. My heels struck something solid. I heard a grunt of surprised pain and the sound of cartilage crunching. He stumbled back a step. It was all the space I needed. I scrambled out, grabbing the first thing my hand found on the small shelf above me. A can. It was cold and metal. Hairspray. As he lunged for me, his face contorted in rage, I jammed my thumb down on the plastic nozzle and sprayed it directly into his eyes. He screamed, a real scream this time, high and furious. He clawed at his face, staggering blindly. The chemical smell filled the air. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted. I ran from the room, past his flailing form, and into the dark hallway. I took the stairs 3 at a time, my bare feet slapping against the wood. I half fell, catching myself on the banister, my shoulder screaming in protest. I didn't care. I just kept moving. Behind me, I heard him roaring my name. I could hear him stumbling down the stairs after me. The kitchen. My mind was a blizzard of panic, but one clear thought cut through it. Daniel.
He was a sailor, worried about getting stranded. Emergency kit. In the kitchen. I slammed into the kitchen, fumbling along the counter in the pitch black. My hand knocked over a glass, and it shattered on the floor. I ignored the sting as a piece sliced my foot. The third drawer, the junk drawer. I yanked it open. My fingers scrabbled through pens, rubber bands, loose batteries. Then I felt it, the plastic grip, the wide barrel, the flare gun. His footsteps were at the kitchen doorway. I didn't hesitate. I spun around, ran for the glass sliding door that led to the backyard, fumbled with the lock for a terrifying second, and then slid it open. I burst out into the cold night air. The manicured lawn was soaked with dew, cold under my bleeding foot. I heard the kitchen door slide open behind me. He was coming. I pointed the gun at the sky and pulled the trigger. There was a loud pop, a hiss, and a ball of magnesium fire shot into the night, trailing sparks.
Everything was bathed in an intense, pulsating red light. The perfect lawn, the dark tree line, the stone patio, and Mark's face. He was halfway across the patio, his eyes swollen and red, his expression one of pure, unrestrained fury as he charged at me. The flare arced overhead, beginning its slow descent, painting the world red. He was almost on top of me. I didn't have time to reload, I didn't even know how. So I held the heavy plastic gun by the barrel and swung it like a club. It connected with his wrist, the one on the hand he was reaching for me with. There was a dull, wet crack. He howled in pain and collapsed to his knees, clutching his arm. I stood there, panting, the useless flare gun still gripped in my hand. The red light began to fade. And then a new light cut through the dark, white and sharp. Headlights. A car door slammed shut somewhere down the driveway. "Everything okay over there?" A man's voice called out. It was Mr. Henderson from next door. The flare had worked. The white light of his car's high beams washed over the patio, pinning Mark in place like a terrified animal. In the distance, I could hear it. Faint at first, then growing louder and louder. A siren. The weeks that followed were a blur of police statements, insurance calls, and Daniel's frantic, suffocating concern. Mark was in custody. He had a restraining order a mile long and was facing a list of charges that would keep him away for a very long time. The system worked. I was safe. I kept telling myself that. I was sitting in the living room, staring at the new glass panel that had replaced the one Mark had broken, when my phone rang. It was Daniel's lawyer, a man named Arthur. His voice was always dry, like rustling paper. "Sarah," he said, "I hope I'm not disturbing you. We have some new information regarding Mark's assets." "Okay," I said. I didn't care about his assets. "As part of the investigation," Arthur continued, his tone unchanging, "the police conducted a comprehensive financial audit. It's strange. For the past 2 years, he's been funneling money into a shell corporation, a holding company." I waited. "The company is called Blackwood Development. Does that name mean anything to you?" "No," I said. "Should it?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. I heard him clear his throat. "Sarah, Blackwood Development was the primary contractor that built your house, the company that Daniel hired. Records show Mark purchased it 18 months ago, under a proxy. He didn't just put in an offer, he bought the entire company, assets and all." The phone felt very cold in my hand. The room seemed to tilt slightly. What are you saying?" "Daniel designed the floor plan," Arthur said, his voice softer now, as if he finally understood what he was delivering. "The aesthetics, but Mark oversaw the actual construction, the framing, the wiring, the plumbing." He was still talking, but the sound was fading, replaced by a low hum in my ears. During their search of his properties, they found blueprints, not Daniel's, different blueprints. They showed a series of narrow passages, access panels, built into the walls, behind the drywall. They found dozens of high-end surveillance cameras and microphones hardwired directly into the house's main electrical grid, routed to a server he kept off-site. They're everywhere, Sarah. In the bedroom, the kitchen, the bathrooms. They've been active since the day you moved in."
Though he hung up the phone, I didn't say goodbye. I slowly placed it on the coffee table. I stood up and looked around the vast, bright living room. The afternoon sun streamed through the huge glass walls. It was all so clean, so perfect. Daniel thought he had built me a fortress, a safe harbor from my past. But he hadn't. I raised my eyes to the pristine white wall across from me. I saw the faint outline of a picture frame Daniel had hung last week. I saw the sleek, integrated light fixtures. I saw the smooth, perfect surface. They weren't walls. They were one-way mirrors, and I had been on the wrong side of the glass all along. Every private conversation, every shared laugh with Daniel, every night I had laid in bed believing I was finally free, finally safe. He had been there, listening, watching. This house was never my sanctuary. It had always been his theater.